Hello everyone. I wanted to create my next video on logics and I will, but I thought to myself, well, since logic involves truths and falses and there are some commands here dealing with errors, I said to myself, well, let me create a short video and explain the different types of errors that you would see in Excel, especially because I have not made such video in the past, and explain these eight important types of error that you will see in Excel first, so you have an understanding of why Excel gives you an error, and then I will go and talk about logics and the rest. So in this video, we are going to look at these important errors that you will see, the common errors that you would see in Excel. So they all start with the pound sign. So pound sign num n/a value, division by 0, reference name, null, and all of these pound signs all together. Okay, so let's see why they are created. So num. Num means you have a numeric value that is not valid. Like what? Like, for example, if I want to calculate the function logarithm, the base of the logarithm has to be what? Has to be any number, but the main number, right? So if it's log of x to the base of a, the x cannot be negative, right? Or can it? If the base is positive and the number itself is negative, like for example log of -2 to the base of 3, something like that, correct? What can happen? Well, it's impossible that you raise 3 to any power and you end up with -2. If it was -3, you had a chance, but when this is +3 and the number itself is -2, there is no solution for that, right? We know that is not possible. So if you do such a thing, what happens? So here I have a -2 and a 3, and they say this is equal to log of -2 to the base of 3, right? And it says, okay, what are they talking about? There is no way for me to calculate it, right? Now, you might wonder what happens to the square root function. Is that going to show something like that? Well, we can try it, right? So we can say this is equal to square root of -2. Let's see. You see, that's the same thing. It's not going to give you a complex number, okay? It does not want you to enter a negative number under the square root or any even number for the root. So now what about these NA? So NA means the value could not be found, okay? It's not a reference value. The reference error is a separate one. It means I tried to execute the function for the value you asked for, but I could not find anything in the list you provided. So the lookup or the match would be an example of when this error is happening. So let's say here I have number 0 and I want to find the corresponding value of 0 in this list, and the location or the position of 0 in this list, and then find the corresponding value in the second list, right? So I say what is the location of 0, find it in this list, and wherever it is, give me the corresponding value in the second vector or column. And it says, hey, I have not found anything, and it doesn't give you anything, okay? So it gets I could not find it. Now you might say, well, if I change this to 1.5, is that gonna give me an error? Again, look, 1.5 is not in that list, right? But look, it does give you something, and it gives you the value of 1, because this vector is sorted from smallest to largest. And what it does, the lookup, if it cannot find the value for what you are trying to look, it goes and tries to look above it, look up, correct? Look above it, see what you can get. So 1.5 is somewhere between 1 and 2, cannot find anything for it, so it goes to the number right before that, which is 1, and returns the value of 1. But when I did 0 in this list, there is nothing that matches 0 or that is smaller than 0, so it's not going to find anything and return anything. Okay, so you see that not always, because the number is not in the list, you are going to get an error in the lookup. Depends on where that number is located with respect to the numbers in the list. Or let's say the match. So remember when we did the match, we had exact, we had positive 1 and negative 1, which means the largest number smaller than the looked value, and negative 1 means the smallest that is larger than the looked value, right? And for that you have to have it in ascending or descending order. Now if you want exact match and that value is not there, so let's say 1.5 again, and I say give me the match of this 1.5 in this list, but I want the match type to be 0, exact. It says, well, I cannot find such a thing for you. Okay, so if it cannot find it, you will get what? The NA error. Value means there are spaces, characters, text, or something in the formula where it was expecting a number, right? So for example, very simple, I have 2 and A, and instead of me, let's say, raising 2 to the power of 3, right? Let's say here, I have 3, so I say this is equal to power of 2, but I make a mistake. Instead of saying 2 to the power 3, I click on A. Well, you cannot raise 2 to the power A because A is not a numeric value, right? So there we go, you get the value error, right? It means this value, I expected it to be what? A number. You are giving me a text, you are giving me a logical value or something that is not going to work. Okay, so this is different than the num. In num, you provided a number. You said logarithm of negative 2 to the base of 3. They were numbers, but the numbers were not correct, right? They did not belong to let's say the domain of the function, or they did not match the criterion for the function. Here, there is a wrong data type. You are expected to give a number. You provided something other than a number. Okay, so that's quite clear. Division by 0 is, of course, very clear. So here you're dividing a number by 0. So let's say this is equal to this number divided by a cell that contains 0. And if you do that, it says division by 0. It also happens if the cell you're dividing, but the value in that cell is deleted. So let's say here it was a 4, and you say this is equal to 2 divided by 4. Well, of course, no problem. But if you delete this cell 4, you know, Excel, for the value of that in any formula that is using that cell, it is going to what? It is going to replace it with a 0, and then now you're going to have 2 divided by 0. You see? So as long as you're dividing by an empty cell or by a cell with value of 0, that's what you get. That's about division by 0. What else? So these are the first 4. Now, reference. It means you're referring to a cell that does not exist anymore. Okay, you have a cell and you're using that cell somewhere, you're referring to it, but then all of a sudden you make a mistake and replace it or delete it. Okay, like what? For example, here I say this is equal to this cell plus, let's say, 10 units. Okay, so I'm referring in this cell to this cell at B13. I'm using it in E13, right? Now, if I go ahead and replace this 3 with something else from another cell, So let's say I have the value of 2 here, and then bring this 2 and replace that 3 with it, which was used for what? For the calculation in this formula. What can happen? So here, if I go ahead and bring this guy and bring it right here and try to replace it, right? So I grabbed it, dragged it, and released it on the location I want to replace. It says, hey, do you want to replace it? You say yes. And now, look, here it gives you the reference error. So, hey, I expected that cell B13, but now you replace it with E something, let's say E15, E16, and now I cannot find my reference to add 10 units to it, okay? So if that happens, you have to see where that reference was coming from and then go and replace it, okay? So do not replace or delete, especially replace. If you just delete it, right, it is going to consider a 0 for it, so it's still going to work. But replacing is a lot worse, right, because now it cannot even find that reference cell. Name means you did not use the correct name for the function. Let's say here I want to find the correlation between this first column and second column, and I say this is equal to correlation. Now correl has 2 R's. If I just use 1 R and say give me the correlation between this one and this one, then Excel is not going to be happy. It says, okay, what do you mean by correl with 1 R? So a very easy fix for this is let Excel fill in the name of the function for you, okay? If you get the suggestion, use that. Do not try to type it all the way if you are not sure. And then it will suggest to you what you need to select. And as I said, you can always click on this FX and then select the ranges like that as well. Okay, so use the suggested names by Excel and do not misspell the name of any function, okay? That's important. So that's about the name. Then we have the null error, which is it does not show up a lot, but most of the time it is for incorrect use of a space, really. And let's say here I have numbers 2, 3, and 4, and I want to say this cell is equal to 2 plus 3 times 4, right? So it's equal to this one plus 3 times 4. But I make a mistake, and instead of using the asterisk and say like that, I act something like when you are trying to type a formula, right? An equation, text equation, where you do not use any asterisk, right? If you want to say x times y, then you simply, in the text equation that you have here, look, you simply say what? You simply say this number a is equal to, let me do it one more time. So a is equal to x plus y times z, correct? So you do not, of course, here say y asterisk z in any, and you might make such a mistake here when you are trying to type the equation. Of course, that's not common, but you might forget to put that asterisk there, and look what happens when you do that. So you say this is equal to this number plus this one. Now, again, instead of asterisk, use a space. Say this one times this one. And guess what? It says null. Okay, you messed up. It's a syntax error. You should not use, you should have used a comma. Or you should have used an asterisk, or you should have used a column, but you used something else. Most of the time you used the wrong space. In this case, you should have used an asterisk, you didn't. Sometimes you use a space in place of a comma. Okay, so when you make a syntax error, most of the time using wrong space, or you are asking for the intersection of two locations, a row and a column, or a list range of rows and columns that do not intersect, you will get this null error. And finally, the last one, this all pound signs, is where the width of the column is not wide enough to show the result. So Excel has to squeeze it, but it cannot, and it shows that, hey, make that column a little bit wider. So let's say here, you say this is equal to now, and now means what? Give me the date and the time. And you do that. Now here, you see automatically it adjusted it, but many times it doesn't, and there we go. You see here, I get a bunch of these, and it means, hey, there is something there, but make it wider to see that. And now you can see that, right? So that's not very hard to fix, right? So num is not too bad. If you just go, you can find it probably. Value, again, not too hard because you made some obvious error. NA, I would say if you know the commands that you are using, especially match and lookup, how they are working, and I mentioned them a ton here, what can give an error in those functions, you can fix it. Division by 0 is very obvious. Name is very obvious. This one is very obvious. The one that is a little bit harder to fix is the reference. You have to really know where was the reference that you deleted. And if there was no reference error, and now that you changed something, you got the reference error, I always recommend go ahead and do a Control-Z, go back and look at the place that you are trying to delete or replace and see whether that cell is used elsewhere as a reference. Okay, so it's not as easy as the rest, but if you pay enough of attention, you can do it. And null also is not a super common error, but you will be able to fix it if you just look at your formula and find where you should have used a comma, a asterisk or something, and instead you use the space, or you provided some ranges that do not intersect rows and columns. Other than that, fixing most of these errors is not as hard. Okay, so here are the main errors. And now that you know them, in the next video, I'm going to go over logic, and we talk about how to use logic commands in Excel. Thank you.